welcome everybody to our April Early Years Twilight event. Like I say, we've still got a few people joining. I'm always, must just saying to Helen, massively in awe of you guys that you come and join us on an evening after a very long day and give us 2 hours of your time. So thank you very much. We've got a really great agenda, which I will get to in a minute, but I will just go over a little bit of housekeeping. As always, we record these sessions, so if I can just ask that your microphones are on mute unless you're presenting, it just helps me cut down on the background noise, and then cameras off if you don't want to be on the recording as well, please. The slides are shared afterwards, so we will kind of make sure that you've got a PDF copy of the slides and all the links are embedded on the slides as well. I will try and put some links in the chat as we're going. And then the other thing with the recording is if you give me a couple of days maybe, I will get it edited off and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So again, you can either come back and catch something that you might have missed, or you can share it with your teams as a resource as well. That's all the housekeeping stuff. Like I've said, please do go onto our YouTube channel if you want to look at some of our previous recorded sessions. You can see that they tend to be chaptered in the information on the video, so you can see what was on the agenda if you want to skip to bits that feel particularly relevant for you. Like and subscribe. I always feel a bit weird saying that, but it just means you get the notification of when I do post it, so you can see when you can access it. In terms of getting accreditation for attending the session, that will come through via NES, which was your booking platform. You will usually get asked to fill in a very quick feedback sheet. It's always really helpful if you do submit that, because it just means we can make the sessions even better for you moving forwards. So as I've said, we have got a packed agenda. We've got loads to cover in the next couple of hours. Myself and Helen are here to kind of welcome you. We're going to hand over to Marie, who's going to look at some work from the LADO. Helen's going to be joining us about 7:20 to look at the impact of poverty. We've got Steph Campbell looking at parental conflict and staff conflict, and then Joanna and Kelly are looking at the safeguarding audit tools and writing safeguarding policy. Helen's back in to talk about some of the Ofsted feedback, and then I will be kind of wrapping up the evening just with some business unit updates. I'm going to do a little bit of learning that's come through from some serious police reviews, and also give you an overview of the working together changes that came out a couple of months ago now. So I think that's it. Like I say, make sure you've got snacks and a cup of tea ready for the couple of hours. I'll be on the chat, so if there's any questions, please do use the chat. Before we go at the end of the evening, I will just ask you one question to pop in the chat, which is one action or one thing that you're going to take away from the evening. So think about the things that kind of are sitting really important with you over the next couple of hours. Okay, enjoy the next couple of hours. Right, I'm going to hand over to Marie. Are you with us, Marie?
I am. Good evening, everybody.
Super.
Thank you, Kat. So thanks for letting me come and speak to you today. I'm going to do a very whistle-stop tour of managing allegations against staff and volunteers. So I was really lucky that I met quite a few of you who attended the early years conference, and it was a really lovely morning. A lot of people shared some views about allegation management, and I know that it can be incredibly stressful and anxiety raising if you are the subject of an allegation. So I'm going to come at this from the standpoint of just having a very brief look at the allegation process, just to dispel a few myths, hopefully, for people. So I've included lots of slides for everybody's reference, and as Kat said, there's going to come through as a PDF, but I may gloss over quite a few of them quite quickly because I have only got 20 minutes, and for those of you that know me, you know that I can talk a lot. So on that note, let's crack on. So Kat, can we keep moving on then? Oh, you might have to keep pressing the thing. Lovely. So it's the two that are highlighted in bold that I wanted to talk to you about tonight, really. So it's clarifying what an allegation is as opposed to a complaint, because I know that that can be a real area of confusion for a lot of people, and also to clarify exactly what the role of the LADO is, because it's an incredibly misunderstood role. and we'll explore some of the specific responsibilities that the LADO has during an allegation management process. So next slide, on that next slide, which I think Kat had up, I just wanted to share with you who we are in the team. So there is 4 LADO managed by myself. We're all social workers or have significant experience in safeguarding. Julie, Joe and Karen and myself, we've all got 25 years plus experience as social workers, and Andy Kenyon's been a detective sergeant in child safeguarding. And that kind of gives a key to the LADO role. We're not there to be judge and jury when something goes wrong in terms of staff behaviour. We are there to give a safeguarding lens on staff conduct so that we can ensure the right people, safe people, are working with our most vulnerable young people. So our role as LADO is to help employers, the police and children's social care, depending on the nature of the allegation, conclude an allegation with a safeguarding judgment. So that is different to a disciplinary outcome. It's obviously different to a criminal offence outcome, and it's obviously different to a child protection assessment that may be done by children's social care. But we will use all the information that's gathered as part of those processes to make a safeguarding judgment. Hence, we're all social workers or safeguarding professionals. So move on, Kat, if you don't mind. So I've just put on this slide all the reasons, reasons why you may personally be involved in the LADO process. And this is why it's so important to know about allegation management, because it's not just about you may yourself be the subject of an allegation. As I say, that can be incredibly anxiety raising, but it doesn't have to be. If managed properly, it should be a fairly painless process. Now, I'm not saying that you won't feel anxious if an allegation is made, but you should feel supported, either by your employer or by the regulator. Now, no, it's very, very difficult for some of our colleagues who are self-employed or sole workers, such as childminders. You don't have the same support mechanisms in place, and therefore you are going to rely very heavily on family support. But we are there to answer questions for people, so we wouldn't want anybody who is subject to an allegation to be suffering in silence on their own. If you are the subject of an allegation and you are a sole self-employed individual and you don't know what's going on with the allegation process and you're not getting any answers from your regulator, please feel free to pick up the phone. Now, we can't talk to you about specific details of a case that you may be the subject to, but we could talk to you about the process, so at least we can dispel some of the myths and try and help you a little bit to understand the process that you are subject to. So yeah, there are lots of different reasons why you might have to know about the allegation management process. Managers and DSLs are very much encourage you to access full allegation management training via NES, and for staff, there is an on-demand training briefing which is available to share or for you to download as and when you might need it, which will help explain the allegation management process in a lot more detail. And again, that's available on NES, and both courses are free of charge. If we keep going then. And again, so we're just going to have a quick look at some processes and procedures, some legal stuff. So the LADO role is sat in a legal framework and statutory guidance. We are set out in Working Together 2026, and our processes are largely set out in Keeping Children Safe in Education Part 4. Now, it might come as a surprise to you, but there is no other detailed statutory guidance in relation to allegation management. So if anyone's really interested in where our processes come from, have a look at the local procedures, which are on the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children Partnership website, but also make good reference of Part 4 in Keeping Children Safe. Keep going. So things that everybody should have, regardless of how big or small your setting is, you should have a code of conduct and you should have child protection policies. So why are these important in the allegation management process? Because they set out the expected standards of practice and the actions which are needed to be taken in a variety of different scenarios. So when a concern or allegation is raised, it is in part these standards that a person's actions will be measured against when we're looking at that safeguarding judgment at the end of an allegation process. So following policies and procedures is a real safety net, and a safe culture of practice has its foundations in well understood policies which are routinely adhered to. And I've also included signposting to the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Partnership website, where if you do need to notify LADO of a concern, you'll find the notification form on there, and there's a copy of the local allegation procedures, which everybody should try and make themselves familiar with. Let's keep going then. And again, so what is an allegation? So this is the crux of what I really wanted to speak to you about. So if you take away anything from tonight, it's this slide really. So understanding these different criteria will help us to appropriately manage concerns when they might arise in your setting, ensuring timely and appropriate responses. So a complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction about the quality of care or service or practice that might be provided by a setting or an individual. It will generally relate to agency care practice or standards or regulatory standards not being met. So the key features of a complaint is that it focuses on service delivery or professionalism. It doesn't meet the safeguarding threshold. It's managed through your own settings complaints procedures, of which you will have one, I hope, and may involve a member of staff, but without a safeguarding risk. But often it's about general practice, standards of practice. So an example of a complaint, box standard. So a parent complains that staff did not inform them that the child's clothes had been soiled, for example, during the day, and that they'd been left in a child's bag, and that the parent feels that communication was poor. So this concern relates to practice standards, but is not in itself harmful. That'll be managed through complaints process. So where it becomes a little bit more confusing for people, and we'll try and shed a little bit of light on it, is the difference between a low-level concern and an allegation. So a low-level concern is about behaviour that is inconsistent with the staff code of conduct or professional expectations, but it does not meet that harm threshold. It may cause unease or raise questions about boundaries, but there is no harm being alleged. So key features, the concern does relate to an identifiable individual. It's not just about settings practice. The behaviour is inappropriate or unprofessional, but not abusive or harmful. Again, that harm threshold is not met. It's managed internally under the settings low level concerns policy, and this is a really important policy, and I know that my friends over in school improvement have a whole training course on low-level concerns, but it's so important for early identification of patterns or emerging risk in an individual's practice. So an example there might be that a practitioner is regularly over-familiar with one particular child, so showing a little bit of favouritism, allowing them to sit on their lap, for example, despite guidance discouraging this. They may become really defensive when redirected into more suitable practice, but there is no allegation of harm there. Their behaviour breaches those professional boundaries, and they need some training, support and guidance and some input to correct their practice. But this can be managed as a low-level concern, recorded and addressed in-house. But it is really important that it is recorded in a way where patterns of behaviour can be identified over time, and any support and training, learning and input is also recorded. So an allegation, the crux of it, an allegation is a safeguarding concern. This meets the harm threshold and can indicate that somebody in a position of trust may have harmed a child or has harmed a child, possibly committed a criminal offence against a child, behaved in a way that suggests they pose a risk of harm to children, and behaved in a way that questions their suitability to work with children. So key features of this is that it always relates to an identifiable individual. Safeguarding harm or risk of harm threshold is always met. Requires immediate consideration of risk and must be referred to the LADO within 24 hours of coming to your attention. Now, all we need for it to be notifiable to the LADO is reason to believe one of those four criteria have been met. Obviously, we haven't started any kind of investigation or inquiry, and it may be, and often is, once those inquiries have finished, that we conclude that there is no evidence to support that harm is met and that there is no risk. But to notify LADO so that we can follow any investigation, it must just be that we have reasonable cause to believe that one of those thresholds has been met. So the employer, setting or regulator, depending on the nature of the allegation and the nature of the setting, will complete their own internal inquiries. Depending on the nature of the allegation, again, the investigation may require involvement from the police if there's a possible criminal offence, and or children's social care if a child is identified as being at risk of significant harm. So an early years example for this might be that a child discloses that a nursery practitioner, for example, has smacked them hard, making them cry during a toileting incident, leaving a visible bruise. This indicates possible physical harm and a criminal offence. So we'd refer to children's social care for screening as a possible child protection issue, report to the police as a possible criminal offence of assault, and there would be at some point, once the police investigation is concluded, be an internal inquiry by an employer or a regulator about standards of care and practice. Alongside all of those investigations, it would be referred to LADO because we have reasonable cause to believe that the harm threshold may be met. An allegation management process would run in the background, and that's really important. It's not a separate investigation, but an allegation management process would run in the background whilst the three strands of investigation run their course. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on, but in simple terms, complaint is about service or standards. Low-level concerns is about an individual conduct or boundaries where harm's not met. And an allegation is about safeguarding harm or risk in relation to an identifiable individual and the harm thresholds met. So let's move on. So I've put on that slide there for you a little bit about the definition of harm, but we'll keep moving on. I've also included how allegations can be reported, because one area of takeaway really is that allegations rarely come neatly packaged where children or parents will come and report that an allegation is being made. It generally comes in as a complaint, so it is for the responsible manager or individual to apply the definitions of complaint, low-level concern or allegation to ensure that the right process is being followed. So we know that this decision can be tricky. So if in doubt, please notify LADO using a notification form, send it in, and one of the duty LADOs will get back to you and we can work it out together, which is the best process for investigation, where it best sits. However, another takeaway is if you are confident that you know it has not met thresholds, so there's no harm being alleged, but you have given consideration to notifying LADO, but feel, you know, as I say, really confident that threshold has not been met, record your rationale for this, record that you're going to deal with it as a complaint or a low-level concern, and remember to record how you managed it. So if your regulator comes in, if Ofsted comes in, they can see that you've considered referring it, but they can also see why you haven't. So then, if we can move on then. So I've included possible cases. I won't talk through all of these because they're relatively self-explanatory, but only to say that allegations can crop up in somebody's paid or voluntary work, and it applies to anybody over 16 years old. Let's keep going, Kat. really conscious of time. Suitability threshold. So transferable risk, that fourth criteria. This is an area that confuses a lot of people. So transferable risk means concerns about a person's behaviour or circumstances in their personal life that may indicate that they could pose a risk to children. So even if that behaviour did not involve a child and did not happen in the workplace, the concern is about whether that behaviour could raise questions about somebody's judgment, boundaries, impulse control or suitability to work safely with children. So what matters here is that there is a reasonable cause to believe that there is potential risk that might transfer into a child-facing role. So an example of this might be that a nursery practitioner is arrested for violent behaviour towards an adult partner. No children were involved, no children witnessed, and the incident happened outside of work. However, the behaviour raises concerns about their emotional regulation and their use of force, and this may indicate a transferable risk to children in their care and would need careful consideration through safeguarding and LADO processes. Let's keep going then. So where does the LADO fit into this? Keep going, Kat, if you don't mind. So if a notification comes to LADO, so you believe it's met threshold, a duty ladder will screen the notification that you sent in, and then you will get a call back to discuss, and it'll be one of these three possible outcomes. It may be that we, after consultation with you, say that we don't believe that thresholds met, and we will record that as a consultation. About half of what comes into us ends up being recorded as a consultation. It may be with the information that you're providing to us at that time, we're not sure whether the harm threshold is met. So we might ask you to do a little bit more work on it, or we will say that the referral has been accepted, and through our conversations we'll make it clear to you whether it's going to be a single agency that is investigating that allegation, or whether there's need for multiple agencies to be involved. That would include obviously the regulator, the police and or children's social care. Keep going, Kat. Lovely. So what is the role of the LADO? You'll hear lots of LADOs across the land shout out at this point. The LADO does not investigate. We do not investigate allegations. We do not run separate investigations. Please, 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 another take home from today. Please do not say to any of your parents, it's been referred to LADO, they're now investigating. It's not true and accurate, and it's very misleading for parents who get very, very upset when they then contact the LADO and we say we're not investigating, and we share the process with them. So again, if you are unsure about the allegation process after today's short briefing, please, please, please get yourself on to the longer allegation management training, so that you can have those informed conversations with parents if you need to. So depending on the nature of the allegation, the matter will be investigated, as I say, by the employer, children's social care or the police, and the information gathered in those relevant investigations should be shared with the LADO. And the LADO will coordinate the different strands of investigation and provide advice and guidance to employers on safeguarding. We'll ensure that there is a focus on safeguarding children and ensure appropriate safeguards are in place while investigations commence based on an assessment of risk. We will also try and make sure that there is plenty of support available for the subject of the allegation. We'll ensure that appropriate information sharing takes place across agencies about any potential risk, and ensure those affected, as I say, have access to that appropriate support. Coordinate joint multi-agency decision making, and one of our most important roles is to have objective and independent oversight of investigations and outcomes. This avoids bias by the investigators, both negative and positive. We provide advice and guidance to employers about necessary actions required to support safer recruitment once an investigation has been completed. But as I said at the beginning, our primary role is to use the information that's gathered in those investigations, either by the employer, by the police, or by children's social care, to make a safeguarding judgment. So at the end of all of those investigations, to use that information that's gathered in a different way to answer the question, have any of those 4 original criteria that brought it to the attention of the LADO in the first place, is there any evidence to say that the subject has harmed a child, is risk of harm to a child, has committed a criminal offence against a child, or has acted in a way that suggests that they may not be suitable. So that is the role of the LADO, to have that oversight role, to be there to support you guys who are managing those allegations, but also similarly to make sure that any of you who are subject to allegations in your early years role feel supported. We wouldn't do that support ourselves, but it's just to make sure that you've got a strand of support in place. And as I say, I do feel for our childminding colleagues, because you have very limited avenues of support outside of your own networks, obviously, and outside of your own professional networks. So I do hope that you support each other in those scenarios, and that you have that sort of peer support going on, and you can talk openly about what's happening for you. Let's keep going. Am I all right to run over, or do you want me to start wrapping up?
No, you're fine, Marie. Keep going.
Okay, lovely. I've only got another couple. So a few myth busters. I won't go through all of these. I think we've talked about the fact, and I've hammered home, that the LADO doesn't investigate allegations. I'd just like to make it really clear that the subject of the allegation absolutely does get to give an account. Obviously, in all those 3 strands of an investigation, whether it be the employer in a management investigation, if you are the subject of a management investigation, you give your account to your employer of what you believe has happened. If you're subject to a criminal investigation, clearly you're going to be interviewed or give an account. And clearly, if you're subject to an assessment by children's social care, they will ask you for your opinion about any risk. Investigation and suspension implies guilt. I know this is a real big one for people where allegations are made, but suspension, it's an HR act, and it is always a neutral act, and it should only ever be used when it's necessary to protect children or the integrity of the investigation. It absolutely does not mean that someone is guilty. Many people who are reinstated after investigations show that there has been no wrongdoing on their part. Myth 3 is, I absolutely get that people will be worried if an allegation is made that it will impact on their professional reputation. It's really important, and I think we would all agree, we all work with vulnerable young people. We all know that safeguarding is absolutely vital, and this is just another safeguarding practice. It's very important to the integrity of our business and of your reputation, that if there is an allegation against you or one of your colleagues, that everybody feels confident that it's been looked at appropriately and robustly. And most of the time, it's about 80% of the time, allegations are not substantiated, so they're not proven when the investigation concludes. So please hang in there with us. It is a really important process. Everything should be kept confidential, so it really shouldn't affect your reputation. But I do understand that, the anxiety of having an allegation made against you can be great. But if somebody wants to drop the complaint or you resign from a role that the process ends. This isn't accurate. Once we're in the allegation management process, all the inquiries will run their course till we get to a conclusion. And similarly, if the police don't make a charge, that the allegation cannot be concluded as substantiated. Again, that's not right. That's about the different thresholds of evidence. A police criminal offence may not make a charge against somebody because their evidential threshold is beyond reasonable doubt, whereas what we would be looking at, obviously, as you all know, is that safeguarding threshold of on the balance of probability. So even if we can't prove on without reasonable doubt that harm may have been caused, it may be that there's clear evidence on the balance of probability. The subject will be dismissed if an allegation is substantiated. Again, a substantiated allegation does not automatically mean dismissal. Many people where the allegations are substantiated return to work with a training and learning plan. Let's move on then. So the end, good practice tips. So good practice guide, protecting children, protects children, staff and colleagues. Creating a safe culture protects children and reduces the likelihood of misunderstandings, concerns and allegations. It's so important that we follow those policies and training guidance. Always work within your settings, safeguarding policies, code of conduct and training, because these really do exist to protect everyone and provide clarity about your expected practice. Part of what we do when we look at a safeguarding judgment is test how well did somebody act within their policies and procedures. Know your children. Again, key, and I know that I'm teaching you to suck eggs here, it's your bread and butter stuff, but understanding the needs of each of your children and their behaviour plans and their risk assessments, adjust your practice accordingly and never make assumptions about what's safe or appropriate for an individual child. And then remembering the basics, so don't assume that somebody else will act, because safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. If something doesn't feel right, share it. Early action prevents issues from escalating. And let's try and promote accountability in our workforce, whether it be, in a nursery setting or across a group of childminders. You work transparently and be open to challenge from your peers and your colleagues. We're all in the business to drive up standards. We all want to do the best job that we can. Again, follow those agreed procedures and work within sight or hearing of others where possible, and welcome that professional oversight and peer critique. Be honest, self-disclose mistakes or errors. We're all human. We understand that. I'm not. I've made many mistakes in my practice. They absolutely happen, and we do understand that. But if you do make an error or a mistake, promptly share that with somebody or make a record of it or share it with a parent or carer. Make sure that you've identified any learning from that, because covering up concerns creates greater safeguarding risk. Again, it comes back to teamwork, about driving up standards together, support and challenge each other's practice professionally. Safeguarding is most effective when teams and peers communicate openly. And anonymous reporting, it absolutely has its limitations. There has been an increase of anonymous reporting lately. Over the last few years, really. And it's really difficult, because we need to be able to test the credibility of evidence that's coming in. And if somebody reports something anonymously, it doesn't mean that we're not going to look at it, and the regulator might look at it or a responsible manager might look at it, but we can't give it the weight that we would do if we were able to speak to the person reporting the concern. So I do understand that sometimes people feel anxious about putting their name to safeguarding concerns negative, especially if it's about our colleagues or our peers. But what you can do is you can raise concerns and own those concerns and have that accountability, but then ask that you remain anonymous so that your identity is not shared with the subject of the concern. That would be far preferable. I would rather people owned the concerns that they raised, but if people do have those legitimate anxieties, then please share your identity so that follow-up conversations can happen with you about the evidence around that concern. But you can say that you want your identity to remain confidential. Always record accurately, meaningfully, and promptly. Clear, timely recording does protect children and staff, and records should be factual, objective, and completed as soon as possible. Again, I can't hammer that home enough. If you make really clear records of your practice, your daily notes, anything that might have gone wrong, accidents, unusual circumstances, things children have said, it really helps us to understand context if allegations are made. And provide as much detail as you can when you're writing those accounts and reports, obviously. So what you've seen, what you've heard, who was involved, dates, times and actions. Try and avoid opinion or assumptions, and try and make your records in a timely way. So that's me. I have run over, as I always do. I did want to leave a few minutes for any questions, and I haven't been able to see what's been put in the chat. But if anyone's got any burning questions, I'm really happy to answer those. And I have left a few reflections to be sent out as PDFs that you might be able to have a look at in your teams.
Thank you, Marie. There's nothing in the chat at the minute. There was a few people asking for training links, so we've already put those in. If you just want to stick around for another 5 minutes or so, Marie, and if people do have questions, I will ask Helen to present, and then if anything comes up, you can drop it in the chat as an answer, if that's all right.
Of course, absolutely. Hope that was useful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Very useful. Okay. Helen, I think you're with us, aren't you? If I can ask you to come in and present now, please.
I am, yes, thank you, Kat. Yes. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name's Helen Ingle. I'm a public health manager in the public health team at the council. So I work on things like healthy eating, school food, free school meals, child poverty, healthy weight as well. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes just talking about some of the work we've been doing around child poverty in North Yorkshire to try and help families to reduce financial pressures, help with cost of living, things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some statistics and what we've been doing with schools, and I've got some suggestions for how we might be able to support yourselves, early years professionals as well. So this is what I'm going to cover. Few statistics on child poverty to start with. I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Child Poverty Strategy that came out at the end of last year, and then tell you a bit about a guide for schools that we developed in the last couple of years, and then some suggestions of how we might be able to support you, to support your families. So be really welcome any thoughts or feedback on that, either in the chat or you can email me afterwards. So next slide, please. So what is child poverty? So the main definition that we use for our statistics and things like that in the country is relative poverty. So there's a definition there. So it's about living in a household with an income that's less than 60% of the median household income. So it's about looking at what the average is for where you live, for your country, and if you're below 60% of that, that's relative poverty. So it's about very relative to who else is in the country, in the standard of living that's the norm for the country that you're living in. So that's quite kind of the normal definition that's used for poverty. The other one would be absolute poverty, which is more of a sort of you're living below the threshold where you can't afford basic human needs. You can't afford food, water, shelter, education. That's absolute poverty. But for a lot of the statistics that we use, we tend to use relative poverty. So there's a couple of quotes there I just thought were quite good, really. This one from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Poverty means not being able to heat your home, pay your rent, or buy the essentials for your children. It means waking up every day facing insecurity, uncertainty, and impossible decisions about money. And then there's one from Peter Townsend, who's a sociologist. Individuals, families, and groups in the population can be said to be in poverty when they lack resources to obtain the type of diet, participate in the activities, and have the living conditions and amenities which are customary or at least widely encouraged and approved in the societies in which they belong. So again, it's about those sort of social norms, what's normal for your environment, for your community, being able to live to that standard. So bit of an overview of child poverty. A few statistics here. We've just managed to get hold of some. This is the sort of most recent data, the sort of 23 to 24 data that is available online. So in terms, again, we're looking at relative poverty here. So nationally, it's about 31% of children are living in relative poverty. Yorkshire and Humber, that's 32%. In North Yorkshire, it's about 22%, but of course that varies greatly around the county. And we've just updated this chart. We had the sort of old localities there before, but they split the data now by parliamentary constituencies. I was a bit sort of confused about having Wetherby on there, but that's one of the constituencies that falls under North Yorkshire. So these bar charts are a little bit confusing. These bar charts are the height of them is to do with the numbers, which is up the axis on the side. So the higher the numbers of children living in poverty is the heights of the bar charts. And then we've added the percentages on. So a bit confusing, I think, but really, but in terms of numbers of children, the highest numbers we're looking at Scarborough and Whitby and Selby for the highest numbers of children living in poverty. But if we're looking at percentages, it's Scarborough, Whitby and Thirsk and Malton have got the higher percentages of children living in poverty. So as a very rough guide, if you had a classroom of 30 pupils, 30 children, you might have about 7 that are officially living in poverty in that classroom. But of course, alongside that, there will be other pupils whose families are facing financial challenges and are struggling with cost of living and so on. So, just to bear that in mind. Go to the next slide, please. So the impact of poverty, children who live in poverty, as you will know, more likely to live in environments and housing that might be cold or damp or not have access to good nutrition. So in terms of poor physical health, are more likely to have a lower birth weight, twice the rates of obesity in our more deprived areas to our least deprived areas. They're more likely to have things like asthma and long-term illnesses, more likely to experience mental health problems, underachievement at school, difficulties getting into work in adult life, more likely to live in areas of crime or antisocial behaviour, and to experience lower social mobility and social deprivation. So lots of challenges associated with living in poverty. Next slide, please. Just got a couple of slides on poverty in the early years. Found some really nice reports when I was preparing these slides about poverty in the early years in particular. So I won't talk through all of this, but just a few sort of facts really. The younger children are more likely to live in households in poverty. One of the reasons that they're less likely to have 2 parents going out into full-time work if they're younger children or toddlers. Poverty affects young children's experiences, so the parents may have less money for food or warmth or lighting or nappies, baby food, things like that. But also they're more likely to show gaps in communication, language, cognitive skills. They may not have access to age-appropriate toys or books or activities that can help their development, help their school readiness. So they're more likely to be disadvantaged in that way as well. But also families that are under financial strain are more likely to have anxiety, depression, and conflict in the home, which can affect the parent and child relationships as well. Next slide, please. So the report I was looking at, talks about protective factors, what can help families to help protect against the impact of poverty. So it's things like making sure there's that support around families in the neighbourhood, making sure the mental health is good, that there's good support for mental health services if needed, that they've got access to high quality early education. That those bonds and that relationship is fostered at an early age, and they've got financial stability and housing stability. So making sure those sort of more practical things are in place as well. So a couple of quotes there. Top one's talking about the range of professionals, early years professionals, health visitors, family support workers, and many others on the front line. Are in the front line of the difficulties that families with young children are facing. We're responding to the legacy of the COVID pandemic, the rise in the cost of living, and working across those service boundaries. And obviously there's always budgetary pressures as well. Tackling early childhood poverty rests on public policy, so that might be national policy, financial policy, around benefits and so on, employment, but also it's about looking at local action, local authorities, early year services in health and education, local businesses, community and voluntary. So everybody coming together. We need that national approach on local as well, of course. Next slide, please. So the National Child Poverty Strategy, this was published in December last year. It's a 10-year plan to reverse child poverty, and it aims to lift 550,000 children out of poverty by 2030. I'll just see, just because of time, there's a little bit of information there about why we need the strategy. We'll go to the next slide, I think. I'm just conscious of time. Thank you. So some of the things within the strategy, some of the things they're looking to do, as you may be aware of some of these, they're extending free school meals to all families on universal credit, extending free breakfast clubs in primary schools. They've extended the holiday activities and food programme, which we call Feast in North Yorkshire, which is great. They're looking at sort of limiting branded uniform, removing the 2-child limit, increasing the national living wage, expanding funded childcare, having Best Start family hubs, and Families First Partnership, which is about early intervention in children's social care. So lots of action there within the strategy to help reduce child poverty. Next slide, please. So one of the things we've done in North Yorkshire in the last couple of years, we developed a guide for schools, which is called Action on Poverty, a guide for schools in North Yorkshire. It has 6 themes within it. And the idea, we wanted it to be really practical for schools, that they could take it and do sort of map themselves against some of the suggestions and criteria within the guide and identify gaps and areas that they could improve on. So we've got 6 themes like food, uniform, support for families and so on. Each theme has its own checklist, so the school staff can just go through and assess themselves against each of the criteria, identify gaps and develop an action plan. And if they're showing that they're doing work on it, we can issue a certificate, which we link it to our Healthy Schools programme. If we go to the next slide, please. I think I've only got a couple of slides left. I know I'm conscious of time, but this is my question really to you. We'd really like to support early year settings and professionals to help you to support your families. I've had some conversations with some colleagues in the council, and felt that, I mean, the schools guide is 30 pages. It's quite a comprehensive guide. Not everything in there is probably relevant to early year settings. So the colleagues I've spoken to suggested maybe more of a reduced a resource or a checklist or something, a bit more of a guide, a shorter guide, that early year settings could work through, with ideas to poverty proof your setting, and tips and ideas of things you can do to make your environment more inclusive, to children who are living in low-income families. So they're not excluded, the pressure's not put on them financially with things. So we could issue a certificate linked to the Healthy Early Years Award. We could provide resources and learning and information for staff. And potentially we're looking at pulling together a flyer or some sort of information on financial support for families as well. So those are some suggestions. Thank you, Pam. I can see your comment in the chat. Thank you very much. But yeah, welcome any thoughts on that. If you think that would be helpful, you're welcome to email me or put something in the chat. So it'd be really good to get your thoughts on what might be helpful to help early year settings. That's my email address there, so please do get in touch if you've got any thoughts.
Thank you,
Thank
Helen.
you very
Once
much.
again, if people do want to pop things in the chat, if you think that sounds like a great idea, which I do, please just give Helen a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. Likewise, I'm almost certain there will be people doing amazing things out there already in terms of supporting families who are in poverty. So if you're doing something, pop it in the chat or share it with Helen, because I think it will help develop the guide. Because I know you guys will be doing amazing things anyway. But yeah, huge thanks, you, Helen. Kat. Just stick around for an extra couple of minutes, and if anything else comes up in the chat, I can always email it to you afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to welcome Rachel and Steph. If you can come in and present now, please.
Thanks, Kat. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Steph Campbell. So I'm the Parenting and Reducing Parental Conflict Lead across North Yorkshire. I've just recently moved into this brand new role. So myself and Rachel are going to present this evening around relationships, thinking about conflict, both parental and also within settings, and also touch a little bit about the involvement of dads and fathers in early years education as well. So Rachel, I think you're here as well somewhere.
I am, yes. Hello. So I'm Rachel Uden. I'm the group manager for Early Help, and I'm just here to help support Steph this evening.
Thank you. Can we go on to the next slide, Kat, please? Super. So when we're thinking about parental conflict, why is it so important for children, particularly in early years, but across all ages? The evidence tells us that parental conflict, which we know conflict is normal within most relationships, but that conflict which is frequent, intense and poorly resolved, whether parents are together and living together or separated, places children at risk. And this could be, social, emotional and also educational outcomes. And it has those long-term impacts, particularly as children grow, when we're thinking about additional risk, particularly outside the home, exploitation, with friendships. There is a lot of evidence to kind of highlight this as well. So couples that are in relationships that are characterized by hostility and distress are often then less sensitive to the needs of their child. So where we've got parents who are in, that really entrenched conflict with one another, on a regular basis, this is emotionally draining for the adult. And it also then, means that they're less able to support their child emotionally, whether that be through a wide range of things as well. And this could be where parents have separated and actually, they maybe don't realise that by not speaking to each other or communicating with each other, that is that form of conflict. The word conflict can often, I suppose, come with a lot of additional meaning as well for parents, and it's been really sensitive to that when we are thinking about the work that we're doing with parents, particularly as settings, how you discuss that with parents. If you've noticed that actually, they might be disagreeing quite regularly, there might be communication which feels quite difficult or possibly non-existent communication. So we'll go on to cover that a little bit later as well. So the other thing that the evidence tells us is when we are supporting children or supporting parents with parenting, so thinking about that parent-child relationship, actually it's less likely to be effective when parental conflict or conflict between those really important adults for a child is ongoing. So actually, we could have a lovely, parental program which supports that parent in their parenting and their relationship with their child. But whilst they're still in conflict, actually that's not going to be as effective. And children are learning about healthy relationships from their parents and from those adults around them. So again, if they're not seeing those examples of, healthy, resolution of disagreements and resolving that, they're going to start learning that as part of their, development as well. And again, it says that, when parents are able to communicate and get along better, children do better in terms of education and emotional well-being. Could we have the next slide, please, Kat? So hopefully this is a video, and I'm really hoping that the sound works. So if you hover over and press play at the bottom, fingers crossed we should get the sound.
Conflict between parents is normal, but if exposure is frequent, intense, and poorly resolved, this can have a damaging impact on children, resulting in long-term mental health issues and emotional, social, behavioural, and academic problems as they grow up. Today, there is a growing awareness of the importance of the quality of the relationship between parents, whether they are together or separated, and the need to tackle conflict in the best interests of children. There may be lots of services in your area that focus on parenting, or the relationship between parents and children, but the ability of these services to help children is likely to be reduced if damaging parental conflict is left unresolved. This is a problem if it means that important local services and programs aren't equipped to improve children's lives in the way we all want them to. Many practitioners and services working at the front line lack the confidence, tools and knowledge to identify and support families where damaging conflict is going on. Many parents only seek help when conflict reaches crisis point, and many families experiencing poverty or financial stress who are at a greater risk of experiencing damaging conflict are less likely to get access to vital support. Early intervention to reduce the impact of parental conflict needs to be at the heart of services, to improve outcomes for children and improve the effectiveness of other family support. We can help you to shape these services in your area.
Thank you, Kat. And I think that's just something to kind of obviously explain in a little bit more detail what parental conflict, I suppose, is, and also those impacts of it. And I think it's something particularly, when we're working with children in settings, it might feel like a really difficult conversation to have. And Rachel's going to go on and talk a little bit later. And some of the questions that I want you to be thinking about as we move through this is how is your confidence in terms of, I suppose, having those conversations with parents when you notice conflict. That curiosity around those parental relationships as well. Are you asking those curious questions? Are you kind of wondering what that does look like for that child? And particularly when we're thinking about, very young children and babies, actually, they might not share what is going on at home and give that voice in the same way. But as it says here, there's a couple of kind of signs. I mean, there's lots of signs that you might just be aware of when you're working with families where their relationship is sort of in distress, or there is that sort of harmful communication between them both. So some of the signs might be, again, disagreeing, they're contradicting each other, they maybe don't agree on parenting, and when you speak to one parent they might share a very different opinion to the other. The other thing that could be present with separated parents, particularly where there is a shared care agreement between child going between the two homes that they have, is you might notice that parents aren't aware maybe what is happening in the other parent's home, and they might ask lots of questions around what is happening in the other person's home, and trying to find out additional information as well around what the life of the other parent looks like. You might notice that when children are dropped off, they could become particularly distressed on one day where perhaps it's a transition day between a house with either one of their parents. Again, some of the other things that you might notice from parents is thinking about when you're having those conversations with them, possibly trying to encourage you as a professional to be on their side or to agree with them. And then sometimes they might place you within that conflict to try and triangulate you and say, oh, well, can you, tell mum this, or can you tell dad this? And it's really mindful just to be aware of how sometimes you could be pulled into that, particularly, if a child might be finding, something a little bit difficult in the setting, you might be noticing some emerging needs for that child. It's really important to remain, neutral within that. And I think have those more difficult discussions with them if you are noticing that possibly they're trying to pull you into that disagreement with one another. So again, I've already mentioned some of the signs in children. Obviously, for younger children, they're less likely to be used as a messenger, but quite often we see this where parents aren't communicating well with each other. A child is asked to, can you tell mum this? Can you tell dad this? It might be, children are bringing kind of bits and pieces to nursery settings or to childminders, which then need to go back to a parent. Parents may have disagreements around particularly separated parents, what clothes a child might wear, and well, they can't take that back on a Thursday because that's the day that they go to dad's house and they must leave it with you. It's really important to kind of be aware of that, and as I said, have those conversations with parents, but also remain really neutral with that. Again, for those kind of, I suppose, older children within early years, they might not want to share about what's going on in one of their homes if they live between two homes, or being particularly worried about transition days. Again, with those younger children, babies, it's been evidenced that from 6 months they show signs of distress, elevated heart rate, when caregivers and their primary caregivers are arguing with one another. So again, it's something that you might notice in their behaviour, and not necessarily communicated verbally. Could we have the next slide, please, Kat? And I think this segues on to Rachel, who's going to kind of come in and think about how we have these discussions with parents and those more challenging conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Steph, because I'm sure some of you on the call are thinking, goodness me, yes, we may notice something, but how do we broach this with our families, with the caregivers from our setting? And you're quite right, they are very difficult conversations to have sometimes. And it can be done in an observational manner, just saying, we've noticed the behaviour of this child. But I think for early year settings, and leaning on my experience as a nursery manager many moons ago, but leaning on that, we had a really good relationship with some of our parents, but I knew that if I challenged sometimes, they can vote with their feet, they can go elsewhere. And it's balancing that. We are a business and we have a duty of care. We need to keep our keep the business going. So it's how to have those conversations and thinking about how you can broach that in a way that's really supportive. Because what Steph was describing before, if there's conflict within that family home, within those parents, we don't want to be adding to that stress. We don't want to be adding to that conflict. We want to be thinking about how we can support and nurture it. And it's easier if we place the child at the heart of our conversation, because everything that we are doing, every conversation that we have, is because we want the best outcome for that child. So it comes from that place of support, not judgmental, not criticizing, but acknowledging sometimes the pressures. I mean, Marie was talking earlier on, wasn't she, about the challenges of parenthood and having these conversations. And Helen was talking about if there's poverty in the home and the pressure that can bring, which can add to that conflict that can be going on. So I think for us as practitioners, sometimes we worry when we are having these conversations. We think about worst case scenario, and we think about all the pitfalls of having those conversations and how challenging it may be, and how it may escalate into something that we really don't want it to escalate to. But we have to keep in the back of our mind, what happens if we don't have these conversations? Steph has given a really clear outline of the impact it has on the children. And again, listening to what Helen was describing earlier and the effect of poverty on children, the two correlate very much, don't they? The same impact, the same outcomes can be impacted upon for the children. So we almost have a duty of care to have those conversations, to be thinking about how we can nurture those children and try and improve things for them. And if we think that we don't have those conversations and this conflict continues, and that there's that awful anxiety inducing moments of where the parent's there, and as a setting or as a childminder, you may be thinking, oh, I can't ring that parent because I'll upset the other parent if we do. We do get pulled into those conflicts by ourselves, by what one parent will say, or they've been with their dad, or they've been with their mum this weekend, and oh goodness me, they won't have eaten properly. I'm sure this is related, you can relate to what I'm saying, because we know that that can happen. So what we are devising to try and assist all these challenging conversations, what we're trying to put in place to be able to support early years settings, childminders, schools, partner agencies, is to think about maybe having a separated parents policy. So that at the time of registration within the settings, within as I say, anywhere where you're offering this care, and if you find out that there is separated parents in particular, we're not saying there's necessarily conflict there at this point because we haven't identified it, but where parents could be separated. There is a policy that we're just currently devising, we're just getting it signed up at the moment. So you can have these conversations at that time of enrolment to say who has got parental responsibility, who can collect the child, who has the child on what nights, etc. And to have those almost like a policy and a contract put in place so that you can say we will share information about the child with both parents. And it really kind of reduces some of that anxiety that could be present from if those conversations haven't happened early. We're trying to make it as easy as possible, and also for people to consider and identify that conflict at an earlier stage as well. Because if you can pick up on something that's going on at that moment in time, if you think about a young baby that's been enrolled in your setting, that's a heightened time for potential conflict because of the change in the family, because of the possible impact of poverty on there, because of them trying to adjust to this new way of working, because they could be tired, because there's many reasons. So if we can get in there as soon as possible to try and identify those causes of conflict, we don't want it to become prolonged. We don't want it to become where it's going to be really impacting negatively on the children. We know conflict within all relationships is there, it is present, but we need to make sure that it doesn't become toxic within that. If you can move on, Kat, for me, please. Thank you. So if we're worried about these conversations that we need to have, and as I just alluded to on the slide before, we can sometimes get ourselves into a state of oh my goodness me, what's going to happen about this? And that means that we ourselves can become defensive or deflective, or we can bring our social graces to the conversation. We can bring our past experiences. And particularly if we've been in a relationship ourselves where we've had some conflict that's maybe become a little bit more heightened than we wanted it to be, or we are a separated parent ourselves, or whatever it may be, if we bring our experiences to that conversation, we need to be really aware of that. And we almost need to have a conversation with ourselves before going into the main conversation with the parents, the carers, because we don't want to bring any of those preconceived ideas into this. They are not walking in our shoes. We need to try and walk in their shoes. What does it feel like for them at this moment in time? It may be that you are not the right person to have that conversation. It may be that this is a little bit too raw for you at this moment, or you may have really good relationships with the parents concerned. If you've been working in the same setting as the child, and this is the third child in the setting, you've got that really good relationship. It may be that you're not best placed to do that. So really think about who that conversation should be, who should be the one who broaches the parents' carers at that time. And think about how we can have that conversation in a way, as I mentioned before, to really support them, to really build that strength. What we don't want to be doing is making them feel even worse at a time where they're probably feeling pretty rubbish already with themselves with what's going on. It can be a really emotional time. So how can we support them in that really positive way? What little steps can we do to say, right, how can we make this better for you right now? And think about, we can't fix it immediately. We are not the fixers. We are not there with our magic wands. Wouldn't it be nice if we were? We're not there just to make things absolutely better. It's to say, right, let's sit with you in this for the moment. How can we make you feel better with this? How can we make sure that your child is not going to be impacted on this? They may not even be aware that their child is impacted by what's going on. So it's how to have that nurturing conversation with them and let them be aware of the potential if things don't get resolved. Again, at this point, we could use a separating policy if it was appropriate for that. So we need to say what we mean. We need to be clear in what our communication is, what we're trying to say to the parents at this moment in time, and the reason and the rationale for having this conversation, why it's being brought to your attention, why it's got to a point where we have to be able to pass on that information. So we need to do that with empathy, and we need to do it without judgment, without any blame. We don't want to get to, oh yes, goodness me, it must be really awful for you living with, having to deal with this parent that's not living with you at this time. We don't want to be putting blame on the other parent. It's a difficult situation, but we need to be there for both parents if they've got parental responsibility. And we need to make sure that they understand what we're trying to say as well, so that we can repeat things back to them and say, that must be really difficult for me. Tell me what that teaching is just okay, because I know you do this all the time anyway, but it's just being really, really mindful and trying to position ourselves in how they are feeling at that moment. And it's also that when you have that conversation, there may be real emotional overload. So there's only so far that you can go in a conversation at a time, and we may need to agree to come back to this at a time. Ideally, if we can get both parents there to discuss it, fantastic. If we do have the conversation with one parent, though, I would say it's always appropriate to have that conversation with the other parent as well, simply because we want to be transparent. We want to make sure that the child, again, is at the heart of that, and we don't want the warring parents to be able to war and argue over what we've been saying that's come from a place of concern. Thank you, Kat. We can move on. So thinking as well about sometimes within everywhere where we work, all work settings, there can be that professional conflict. And this sometimes can be, I think as well, when we are working in the environment that we all work in, a really nurturing care setting. It can be quite difficult sometimes. We have different values. I've talked about our social graces. We bring different viewpoints, we bring different backgrounds, different opinions on what might be going on, and this can cause conflict and sometimes tension between staff teams as well. And it's knowing sometimes how to try and overcome that. And I say, you all have really, really good relationships with the parents and carers who come to your settings. You do an amazing job. But sometimes, because we do need to speak to them and have these difficult conversations, it can really bring that tension. And it's just something to be mindful of. And I would say you also need to sit in that uncomfortable place sometimes and think how that can be resolved. And as we're saying, to have difficult conversations with our parents and carers, there may be that need to have those difficult conversations internally as well, or with the managers of the setting, whatever it may be. But we don't want things to build and get out of hand, and we need to be able to nip things in the bud and make sure that we can try and get rid of any of that tension and conflict in between ourselves internally as well. And when adult relationships can feel strained, whether this be in the home, whether it be in a care setting, an early years setting, a school environment, the children are going to feel less secure in there as well, because they will pick up on the tensions. Just like Steph was saying, children pick up on tensions within the family home. They pick it up within the settings as well. So we need to try and make sure that the environment is always nurturing, it's always welcoming, it's always child friendly, as I say, keeping them at the heart of everything that we do. We don't want the children to feel that they don't feel safe in there. Often children, if they are experiencing conflict in the home, their place of safety is when they can come into the early years setting, because they know that that's a place where they're going to be cared for. They're not going to have to hear this. And even really young children can hear the conflict that's going on around them. They can feel hear the raised voices. They can feel the tension in the room. So let's please make sure that that's not going to be happening within the early years settings as well. And it says here children may feel hesitant about attending. Well, the children are young, they're not going to be able to walk with their feet, as it were, but you will hear if they are upset about coming into the setting, if they seem really unsettled, they may have picked up on something that's happened in the setting, particularly if it's repeating and replicating what's going on in the home for them. So again, just be mindful, and I know you all do an amazing job, but it's just something that we don't sometimes think about, how we are portrayed within our working environment as well. So it's just something I want to do, raise awareness with you within there. And also it says here at the bottom, if you're a childminder, and we know they're coming into your personal home, that's a really private space for you. But if there is some conflict going in your family home, and that could be that you've just had an argument with your partner because for whatever reason they've gone out of the door in the morning and they didn't take the bins out, whatever it may be, if there is that little bit of raised tension there, children walking into that, they'll pick up on that tension as well. So again, it's just that awareness of thinking about how we can really make sure that conflict is eradicated for children as much as is possible. I do know children will conflict, and we have to show resolution within that, and we teach the children that within our settings. So we're thinking about that with the adults as well within our setting, to make sure that we always have that professional conduct going at all times. Thank you, Kat. I'm going to hand back over to Steph now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So just to kind of follow up on what Rachel's been saying, it's thinking about as well that impact on decision making for children. So particularly if parents who are separated are in conflict, this might then make that decision making around things that are happening for children even more difficult. And it really is about bringing that focus back to the world viewed through the child's eyes. And if you are feeling like you're being particularly stuck within that, trying to bring parents back to, you know, what would your child say? What would your child think? And this can become quite tricky as children move up into school. So thinking about, you know, possible onwards referrals for additional support, you know, potential undiagnosed needs, it can then make things really quite difficult in terms of getting that support for the child if parents really are kind of opposed in their views of what is best for their child. And that is where it is just thinking about kind of like grounding them, and whilst they may not be getting along with each other, actually, you know, what is going to be the most benefit for their child in the long run. And again, it says there, you know, sometimes adults can be, you know, so entrenched in the conflict because it is really difficult to kind of break these cycles when perhaps it has been something that might be going on for quite a while. You know, it's bringing them back so they're not feeling kind of I suppose stuck within that. And as it says there, you know, reassuring them that it's not a win or lose. It's not actually, it's not about their conflict as such, it's about how they work together for their child. Because ultimately, you know, when we ask parents, even those that are in conflict, you know, what is it, what are their hopes and goals for their child, you know, the majority of the time they're saying the same thing, you know, to be happy, healthy, have you know, good friendships, good emotional well-being. And it's kind of aligning that focus. I'm conscious of time, so Kat, could we just move on to the next one? I'll quickly cover a couple of things. So again, Kat's put on here, there is some training, I think, isn't there, on, or there's a page on the North Yorkshire Children's Safeguarding Partnership website where there is some more information where we're thinking about different professional perspectives and that mutual challenge within settings as well. So you've got that there if you want to kind of go and have a look at that, if there's been anything that's come up. So where can families get support? So again, you might be thinking, well, actually, you know, I might notice that, but I might not know where to, you know, advise parents to go to. I can say that it's there, but how do I do that? You know, because it is really, really difficult to have those conversations sometimes. So within North Yorkshire, we are rolling out a new online course for parents. It's called Triple P Family Transitions, and it's for newly separated parents. They don't have to be in conflict with one another. It might be they're separating in that process, or they just no longer live together. but it really brings back that focus to the world through the child's eyes. Actually, what positions are we putting children in when there is conflict, when there is difficulty, when we're perhaps speaking negatively about the other parent in front of them, those non-verbal communications, tones, body language, all of that kind of thing. So that is going to be launching in May, and what we will get out to all early year settings via possibly the partnership website is there's a QR code and a brand new website for that, where parents can refer directly, so they don't need to be open to existing support. It's an offer universally. What they do is they fill in a little form just to assess that it's appropriate for them. So obviously Triple P and any of the conflict work, you know, we've got to be mindful that parental conflict, although it is, you know, and can be really harmful for children, it is not domestic abuse. So being really clear about that. So that Triple P course, it's just making sure that it's appropriate for families, but they can go along. So if you're sort of noticing actually things are a bit tricky, you can signpost them to that. We also have the Relationships Matter website, which is ourselves and I think it's 14 other local authorities, where it is an absolutely brilliant resource thinking about relationships, thinking about communication. And there are loads and loads of hints and tips on there. There's some fantastic videos, both for yourself as professionals, but also to signpost parents too, as that kind of starting conversation around how they're managing that communication with one another. For professionals, we also have a landing page on the NYES. It's part of the early help page, but again, there's some really good resources on there around reducing, recognizing parental conflict, how to support families on there. And there's a lot of things in development, which I'll probably share if I come on again later in the year, around the reducing parental conflict kind of, I suppose, toolkits and things to support professionals in setting. So if we just move on, I'll speak really briefly about this because I know we're kind of over time. So one of the things as well that we're kind of, I suppose, thinking about in terms of the best start in life is around fathers and engagement of fathers within children's early learning in particular. And this is something that myself and Rachel are going to be part of, kind of driving that forward and that consideration about. And as it says here, I'll be brief, but when we're thinking about father involvement in children's education, particularly that early years education, reading to children, being involved, whether that be, you know, that learning through play, all of those kind of lovely interactions that parents have with children, fathers who were involved earlier, you know, it shows, and the evidence has shown that this is, you know, making more positive outcomes for children. When we're thinking about that good level of development, it actually has shown to improve and increase that. So one of the other takeaways that I'd really like for you to have from today's session and that kind of thinking is about that father engagement within your setting. You know, quite often we see that, you know, mothers are, you know, possibly the primary drop off, the primary pickup, and particularly for those, you know, younger children. And I suppose what we're kind of asking you to think about is there anything in your local area which is thinking about dad's involvement within your setting? Are there any fantastic, you know, groups that are being run? How does that look for you? Is it something that you consider within your setting at the minute, how fathers are kind of involved and communicated with as well? And I think this is something not just for separated parents, but also for those parents who are together. You know, again, that information sharing, sometimes in settings, you know, for example, tapestry and things like this, I don't know if they can go out to two parents or whether it's a one parent system. So how is that managed? How is that information shared with both parents to be able to access? And again, I've put some kind of sources and things on there just so you can have a think about it. I think there's one more slide, possibly. Yeah. So again, have that consideration. So thinking about, do you have both contact details for parents on there? But like Rachel had shared with earlier, thinking about that separated parents policy, and that's something that we are developing as well. So I just would like you to have a little bit of a think about it. Think about those things again, like that parents' evenings, you know, those communications. How is that ensured that actually, you know, we really are inclusive to fathers as well within those settings. So yeah, I know I haven't talked for long on that, but I just wanted to kind of add it a little bit at the end, because that is something that is kind of in development, particularly with the Best Start in Life policy as well. So that'll be something that's kind of up and coming that we're thinking about. I think that was it. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions now, I'm not sure if we've got time, but me and Rachel can stick around and answer some questions in the chat as well.
Oh, thank you. Huge thanks, Steph and Rachel. We will move on if that's okay, because try and just get everything covered in the time and get people away. But just stick around for a couple of minutes and just see if anything comes into the chat. If anything comes out in after you've gone, I can always email it through and we can follow up afterwards. But thank you very much. We think we've got Joanna and Kelly now, have we? Yes.
Yeah, this is next. Thanks, Kat. Right, I'll be quick because I'm conscious of time. It's 8:25, so we'll crack on. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. Joanna and I are always absolutely thrilled by how many of you give up your time on an evening. So thank you so much. So thanks, Kat. So tonight we're just going to sort of go through different areas of things that Joanna and I have sort of created and put together to support you with your safeguarding procedures. We've probably met lots of you at the conference and other sort of pre-recorded webinars and things that you might have been watching. So Joanna and I are both safeguarding advisors at North Yorkshire, and we go into all local authority schools. Thank you. So as with anything to do with safeguarding, we always sort of give that warning, really. We're not sharing a lot of sort of disturbing information tonight, but there is a little bit that Joanna will be presenting later on that could be upsetting. So it's just, you know, take care of yourself. If you do need a break, then please do so. Thank you. So just an overview of the session tonight. We're just going to sort of briefly talk about the safeguarding audit tools that we've put together. Then Joanna's going to talk about a guide to writing a safeguarding policy, and then go over some safer sleep guidance. Thank you. So the audit tool then, so we've sort of worked on this using the early years framework. We've got 2 separate audits, and it's basically for yourselves to do that self-assessment audit. And it's sort of it's giving you that peace of mind, really, that you're complying with all the safeguarding requirements. So the partnership has put together that we've sort of, you know, created the audit tools. We've worked with the partnership on these, and they've been saved. I've just put the link actually in the chat. I'll send that now. And there is the link on the bottom of this as well once you receive the PowerPoint. So the audit tools are basically to support you in your settings, making sure that you're covering everything that you should be around safeguarding. So we've used the early years framework, and we've also used the Ofsted early years inspection toolkit as well. So if you just go to the next slide, Kat, I've done sort of like a screenshot. So this is sort of what the opening page looks like. So it's a matter, and obviously it's for yourselves, it's not to be submitted, it's just for your own setting, own peace of mind. So the sort of first page is just for you to put all your details on there. And then there's, I can't remember how long the document was in the end. It was fairly lengthy, wasn't it, Joanna? It's quite a thorough document, that, but obviously we wanted to do it really well for you. So if you just go to the next page, Kat, this is sort of generally what the pages look like. Oh, actually, you can move on. That's the childminder front page. Thank you. So yeah, this one here. So how we've set it out is we've done it in sections. So each section has its own subheading, and like I said, we've used the early years framework and the Ofsted toolkit as well, so you really, you know, can make sure that you've got everything in place that should be there. So this particular example page, we've made it clear at the top that this is from the early years inspection toolkit. So we've referenced everything from there, and we've put page numbers in there as well to help you. And as Ofsted would do, you know, that's either met or it's not met. It's literally as simple as that. So what we've done is created those columns so you can, you know, can show that it's actually in place, it's been met, or actually no, this is something that we need to do at our setting. And then there's obviously all the other sections from section 3 of the early years framework, and then obviously you can work through that document with other people, staff in your settings as well, if you think that's appropriate. So we've put the link in the chat. It's there for you to download, and obviously we always appreciate any feedback, or if you've got any questions around it, our emails are on the front obviously of the PowerPoint. Thank you. So other safeguarding resources that we've got to share with you. So like I said before, Joanna and I go into all local authority schools, you know, and that's from primaries to secondaries, AP, special schools. So what we do is we try and create a pack of resources for them. So that's what we've tried to do for yourselves as early years settings. So we've put some documents together. You will be receiving an email as to where these documents can be found, whether that's on the partnership page with the audit or whether they will be emailed out to you. And what we try to do is we've tried to make your lives a bit easier. So we've put these templates together, which you can use. They're really user friendly. So the first one that's up there, sort of the top page in pink, that is sort of an overview of the early years safeguarding training. We've put links in there to things like the YouTube channel that Kat mentioned before, LADO training that Marie mentioned. So all the links are there. So literally when you get the Word document, you just click on the blue links and it will take you to that training, or it will take you to that document. And then obviously the screenshot to the right, which is in green. So we've got different sort of suggested training that we would advise, whether you're the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead, or the deputy in your setting. So what we've tried to do in the left hand column, we've named the course or the document. The middle column is the link of where to find it, and then on the end column is how often we would recommend that you read that document or complete that training. Thank you. We've also put together for you an Excel document where you can show the training that you've completed. So this tallies up with the other document that was on the previous slide. So once you have completed the training or you have read that section of the framework, then you can clearly type into Excel here, and it just, you know, shows you type your name, put the date you read it, green that cell to show that a date's been put in there, and then obviously you can do that for all staff at your setting. So we would advise, and we do this with our schools, that you colour code that. So the green is if there's a date in there and it's been completed. Red is if the cell is blank, there's no date in there, because that still needs to be completed. And you could also, if you're a whiz on Excel and you can set this in your cells, you could change it to orange if it's coming up to 3 months prior to it needing to be renewed. But obviously that's up to you if you think that would be helpful. Thank you. Another checklist we've put together for you is the visitor signing in checklist, and we share this. I've been in a school today and shared this with one of my settings, and they find it really helpful to literally, obviously it's a Word document, so you can bespoke it, personalize it to your own setting, print it off, laminate it, stick it up to where visitors come into your setting, and then whoever's actually signing that visitor in can go through this checklist and make sure that all the safety elements of that check has taken place. If you don't have a holding area at your setting, in other words, a safe area where they are kept before they are allowed then to get into the area where the children are, then we would always advise that they're vetted prior to coming into the setting. Obviously all your settings are different, so it's for you to sort of really think about that and think what would be the best and the safest practice. So again, we'll get this sent out to you, or send you a link of how to find these documents, and then obviously you can personalize it to your own setting. Thank you. Another one we've done, sorry, you can't really read it on the right hand side, the text is tiny, so we've sort of tried to put it sort of in bullet points to the left parts of it anyway. So this is like a sort of a safeguarding monitoring checklist, and it's making sure that you're doing all of the things correctly in your setting. So that's things like completing the audit, if that's what you want to sort of put in place. It's making sure that you're checking things like intimate care logs, toilet logs, sleeping logs, making sure that accidents and injuries have been recorded. So it's that monitoring of safeguarding. So obviously as DSL, as nursery manager, it's making sure that actually all these things are checked on a regular basis. A lot of our schools do this monthly. They call them sort of like first of the month checks, and it's just making sure that all of the safeguarding sort of information and recordings that take place are being checked on a regular basis to make sure that they are being completed and they are basically in place as well. And it's also checking staff's knowledge. So obviously your staff do all this training, but actually do you check that they understand what the training entailed? So doing those quizzes and things like that. Thank you. And then just sort of one of my last slides is around the training that is available for you. So Joanna and I deliver lots of training around safeguarding, but we've also put some pre-recorded webinars for yourselves for early years settings. We've just added 2 more, haven't we, actually, Joanna, this week? So
Yes.
there's now 5 up there. So looking back at Marie's session where she talked about low-level concerns and she talked about whistleblowing, we've recorded 2 pre-recorded webinars which are completely free for you all. So you can just go on this website, our safeguarding page on ENIUS, and you can click on that and you can watch that pre-recorded webinar for free. They're about 20 minutes, something like that, and obviously anyone in your setting can watch that, any staff member, if you think that's appropriate. So yeah, so that's our page. The link will be sent out to you. Thank you. Okay, that's over to you, Joanna. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelly. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of our areas. So the safeguarding policy guide. Can I have the next slide, please? That's been updated. And it's going to be hopefully on the site later this week or next week. So we've updated that policy guide, and it includes how to kind of write your policy, or if you need to refresh your existing policy. So it gives you an outline of the contents that should be in your policy, bit of information what should be included in each section. We've updated all the statutory guidance and the statutory safeguarding definitions, and we've also included an annex around the North Yorkshire safeguarding procedures. So what you should do if you've got concerns about a child, staff low-level conduct concerns and allegations against staff. So that's an appendix that you can lift up, and it has all the key contacts and what steps you should take. And at the end, that they'll have that list as well with the updated key safeguarding contacts across a number of agencies. So use that to review your policy, or if you haven't got a policy in place, to establish a policy. So we'll make sure that comes out in communication. So next slide, please. So the next one I'm going to talk about is safer sleep. If you're not aware, you might already be aware that the DfE have created and sent out some further advice on safer sleep, and it's around babies and young children and ensuring you put the right environment in place to keep children safe. That advice has been co-written with the Lullaby Trust, and if you haven't looked on their website, it's really, really helpful. We do think the safer sleep requirements will be added to the EYFS statutory framework from September. So the reason for this, if some of you are not aware, there has been some tragic cases where children have died in the UK from unsafe sleep practices in nursery settings, and obviously the DfE want to try and prevent this from happening again. So the focus is on about creating safer sleep spaces to avoid accidents such as risk of suffocation from unsafe sleep practices, or from babies and young children becoming entangled in soft bedding or getting trapped in soft furniture. So the parents of one of the babies who tragically died, Genevieve, in 2022, have campaigned for these changes and really campaigned for statutory requirements to be much tighter on safer sleep for nursery settings. So that's the link for the document. If you're not aware of the cases, just a bit of health warning now, they're not pleasant. That's a picture of Genevieve there. Sadly, she was 9 months when she died from suffocation in a nursery. She was laid down to sleep. She was tightly swaddled and laid down face down in a beanbag and actually strapped to that beanbag. And the nursery practitioner could be heard on the CCTV footage when the police completed their investigation, saying, "I'd rather put her on a beanbag. I'm not wasting a cot." So other practitioners were aware of that and no one intervened around that unsafe practice. The second image is of the TP, is another tragic case, and that's Noah, who was 14 months old. And again, he died from suffocation while a member of staff tried to get him to go to sleep in December 2022. Again, the incident is captured on CCTV. Noah again was tightly wrapped in a sleeping bag this time, and then a blanket was placed over his head, and then sadly he was placed face down. When he didn't and struggled to go to sleep, the practitioner then moved him into the teepee, still face down, and then used her leg to stop him struggling. And sadly, that's where possibly died from suffocation. He again was not monitored, neither was Genevieve, left for a long period of time until somebody checked, and both of those children were both found not breathing, and obviously resulted in their death. So again, staff didn't challenge that practice in that room again of a staff member actually using and restraining a child to go to sleep. So again, that low level concerns, those concerns about practice that Marie was discussing earlier, knowing your low level concerns and empowering staff to challenge poor practices is really key around this. So next slide, please, Kat. So I won't go into all the details, but if you look at the guidance, it is quite clear, and they are giving clear advice. They've reinforced why safer sleep is important, and that there is that risk of suffocation and sudden infant death syndrome. And the clear advice is that babies under 12 months must be placed to sleep in a cot, which meets British standards. They must be placed on their backs in a separate sleep space that is flat, firm, a firm surface. So that can be a cot or a bed, and for older children that can be a mattress on the floor. Heads of children and babies must not be covered, and children under 6 months, the babies under 6 months, there must always be an adult in the room with them, and other children must be supervised at all times. They must be in sight and hearing of staff. You can use monitors, and again, staff must be able to see that child and hear that child on that monitor. So it's really detailed, clear advice. I've just put a short summary of the main subheadings, but under each of those headings, there's clear details around the safety of the equipment, how children should be placed down, checking equipment, use of comforters, checking and monitoring those children all the time, checking their temperatures, removing hats and clothing. And then there's clear guidance on when children fall asleep while travelling, checking their airways. And as soon as you are at your destination, those children, especially babies, being transferred back into cots, not sleeping in car seats, even if that means that child's woken up during that transition. So, like I say, that is a short overview. It's really good that you clearly read through that information and share it with all practitioners. And it's also important that practitioners must read the NHS sudden infant death syndrome advice. And that is not new. That has always been in the standards. And if you want any further information or training videos, the Lullaby Trust have some really good resources. So next slide, please, Kat. So just a bit of advice, just really for you to take away today, is to review your sleep setting in line with this new safer sleep advice and share that with all staff. And really important, the staff do read that advice as well as that sudden infant death syndrome. If they haven't read it recently, definitely worth a refresher. Check all your equipment to make sure that cots, mattresses and bedding meet the British standards that is linked in the guide. And then key, what we've heard today earlier, again from Marie, is about promoting staff low-level conduct concerns and whistleblowing procedures to staff to empower them to step in and challenge unsafe practices and take action if they think a baby or a child is at risk. And part of that, like Kelly said before, your regular monitoring, are you regularly monitoring sleep arrangements, those procedures and staff's knowledge of how they should safely be putting children and babies down to sleep. So sorry, not a pleasant subject to share with you, but we thought it was really important we share with you today. So I think that's our last slide.
Yeah, huge thank you, Joanna and Kelly. And just to kind of reiterate what they were saying, once those resources and links are available, you'll know where to find them. We'll either get them through to you on the newsletters and the bulletins, or we'll make you aware of where they are on the website. So we'll make sure that they're shared. Okay, again, Joanna and Kelly, if you want to just stick around in case any questions come in the chat, and we will go over to Helen.
was going to say, we always share the information on key messages, and of course now you get a monthly email with all the CPD opportunities on, and as new webinars and things like that come on board, they're added to it. So please look at that. And it's just reminded me the very first earlier safeguarding evening we had, which is probably about 4 years ago now, Kat. It was about Sudi, and it was that was our first sort of like big thing. So that's sort of about 4 years ago. So I will whistle through. You can next slide, please, Kat. I think the content of tonight just shows what's going on in the early years sort of environment, and the pace of things that's happening really. So I just want to share with you, since the new inspection framework came in the 10th of November, how many inspections we've had in the county, sort of just dispelling a few myths. So that's how many we've had, 24. Actually, since then, since I've prepared these slides the other day, we've actually had another 5 inspections. So next slide, please, Kat. This slide just sort of breaks down sort of where those standards are. Again, one of the reasons why we've done so much work sort of with Kelly and Joanna, getting all these videos and stuff together, is that safeguarding. You know, it's black and white, it's met or it's not met. So again, you know, Ofsted know that we've worked really hard on sort of putting these resources together and things. So I would, you know, please encourage your staff and everything to look at the webinars that we've prepared. So as you can see here, these are the judgments where the safeguarding met or not met. And of course, we know that there's more grading standards than just leadership and governance, but I've just focused on this because the leadership and governance is what actually will affect potentially your funding. So since the slides were prepared, those 5 that have come through, all of them, the safeguarding were met. 3 of them, the leadership and governance was strong. 1 was expected, and 1 was exceptional, which is absolutely fantastic, a childminder with exceptional. So that's great. I would highlight here that one of the childminders who has been subsequently suspended, she did receive all 6 urgent improvements as well as a not met safeguarding. So that's the sort of childminder on there. So next slide, please, Kat. So again, just as I said, just please bear in mind all of these safeguarding, all of these tools that are available for you. If you haven't sort of looked at the latest updated early years and childcare statutory guidance, again, I would urge you to do that, because that's again where it just sort of emphasises what those regulations are and what those implications are if your setting does if your setting does get a grading of less than sort of expected. Next slide, please, Kat. Just really quickly, I was at an Ofsted regional meeting last week, so just a few things. Again, touched very heavily on the safer sleeping requirements, and obviously that information was shared in that letter. One of the other is about the updated childcare on domestic premises and making sure children aged 16 are registered. The screen time and online safety guidance. And then the other one I just want to touch about, which again, I put in key messages a few times ago, but all these things come out from cases that have happened, and the banned breeds dog is actually something that happened in Yorkshire. It wasn't actually North Yorkshire, but it was actually in Yorkshire, and it was a childminder registering, and she had an XL bully and 3 other dogs. So these things, I mean, the DFE are still considering whether this is actually going to sort of change national policy. So certainly sort of watch this space on things like that. But say all these things sadly come out from things that usually are case studies. But Ofsted just want to reassure providers that they absolutely know that there's been lots and lots going on, lots of information coming out, and they are still inspecting, despite what's on social media, Ofsted are still inspecting under the current EYFS until these changes actually are implemented. Next slide, please, Kat. So again, just this, it was the letter that went out from Olivia Bailey, the MP for Early Education and the Minister for Equalities, and changes to Ofsted inspections, as I'm sure you all know. So now first inspections from 18 months and not 30, and then this faded in where they'll change from 6 years to 4 years. So gradually it'll be faded in. So by March 2030, all early years providers will be inspected within 4 years. This doesn't change the ability for Ofsted to go in unannounced where there are concerns, and actually to go into settings more frequently where there are concerns as well. That hasn't changed at all. Next slide, please, Kat. So again, Ofsted just wanted to reiterate that when you do get that call from Ofsted, in your email that you get, it does say that you can notify the local authority. So again, just drop FIS an email, let us know, tell us about your forthcoming sort of inspection. And then also it does say that if you want somebody from the local authority for your feedback, especially if you're starting to feel that it's not going exactly the way that you were hoping, that sort of you can ask, and it can be on Teams. And again, that this is something that we would need to look at, who we would have available for that feedback time. That's something to bear in mind. And then the other thing, which probably again is in the email from Ofsted, but I know what it's like when you get that phone call. But there is an Ofsted Yorkshire and Humber dedicated helpline, and again, that telephone number, separate to the other Ofsted number, is there for you to contact Ofsted about any aspect of your inspection that's happening or has happened or will happen. And so again, it's an 03000 number, but it will be in that email that you get. And just very quickly from me, just that a reminder that on the Ofsted website there is the blog, and there's all the information, the frequently asked questions. So again, it's constantly being updated with latest information, and there's all the YouTube clips about the renewed inspection. So again, please just access these to help support your provision. So that's me done very quickly, Kat, and I'll hand over swiftly to you.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to make sure you all get away well before 9 o'clock, because I think you've all had a huge level of information overload. So I'm not going to touch much on these slides, but just to let you know that they are available. Just the key headlines from me. You'll have heard a fair bit about a lot of new documents and legislation. There is, let me just pause this before it gets going. A new video that we have put together.
Hi everybody, my name is Hannah Ellingworth. I'm the manager of the Safeguarding Children.
Yes, so there is a new iteration of Working Together to Safeguard
Partnership
Children
for North Yorkshire.
That's come out, and what we've done is we've put together a very quick 10-minute guide to just show you through the updates and what's included. We were going to show it today, but we've not got time to do that, so that's just a little bit of homework for you really, to just share with your teams, just so you've got an understanding of where we're at as a partnership.
And I'm just going to talk you through the changes.
We'll move over this. I was going to look at some learning from cases. Hopefully you all know that our learning from cases is sat on our partnership website. I would say kind of keep dipping into it sporadically. We will, Helen will make a good job of updating you of any relevant learning that comes in, particularly from early years and childcare settings. But we do put them together for you now on quite handy partnership briefings, and we kind of link some of those key messages and the supporting resources. You've heard loads today about kind of the voice of children, and that keeps coming up time and time again through learning reviews. And I always say voice in inverted commas, really, because we think about especially those infants who aren't yet able to speak or communicate verbally, and thinking about how they can tell us what life is like for them through behaviour and things like that. So you may already be aware of this. We launched it kind of the back end of last year, but we do have a Voice of the Child toolkit that's been really well received, which explores voice right through ages and stages, right from pre-birth straight through into adolescence. But we do have a really nice section on early years as well. There's a QR code that will take you to the link and the toolkit. Again, one to just have a little look in as and when you've got some time. And there is a really useful video that we put together which goes through the toolkit and talks in depth about Voice of the Child, so you can access that on our YouTube channel. We'll get through all of this for you. Updates of our training courses that we've got coming on. I know we always get a really strong early years representation through our partnership learning events, but you can see the sessions that we've got coming up. We've got a really interesting session coming up on summer safety that North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service are going to do. So again, that should hopefully give you some really nice tools and tips that you can be sharing with your families, things about kind of water safety, things like leaving windows open when it starts to get hot, things that are really relevant and do unfortunately cause really quite nasty and significant accidents for young people. And we're back again in the autumn. You can see the date for our next early years twilight session. As always, these are your sessions, so if you are finding that there's something particularly pertinent to your role or that you want us to cover, you know where me and Helen and Joanna and Kelly are. You can drop us an email and we will endeavour to get some training and resources put together for you. I always do a plug for this. This is our practitioner forum. This is a kind of a 6-weekly, really informal opportunity to hear from frontline practitioners. I know I've got some early years people that do come and join me. Even if you want to come check it out just for the once, there's never any pressure. But we talk a lot about kind of what it's like in terms of frontline practice from right across the partnership. So a lot of people find it really interesting to hear about what it's like for social workers in school and health visitors. And the one thing I will say is what we hear from practitioners is having direct impact on strategy, policy and practice. So you're making a difference if you're coming. So if you want to come, drop me an email and I can send you the Teams link for that. All our key information I will not go over, but you will get these slides with all the links embedded. So let's get you away for 9 o'clock. You've done incredibly well to stick with us for 2 hours. We've given you so much information. What I would like you to do before you leave, if possible, is to just put one action, something that's going to stay with you from today's session. While you're typing away, a huge thank you. I know some of them aren't with us anymore, but for all our presenters that have kind of given their time in putting the slides together and joining us on an evening to present. And again, huge thank you to you guys for attending and giving us 2 hours of your spare time on an evening. So yeah, a few bits in the chat in terms of one thing that you're going to do as a result of attending today, or one thing that's particularly stuck in your mind that you've heard from the reams and reams of information. But other than that, thank you very much.